Okay. Okay. Sawa. I am sorry, Jackie. I took it back. Hauko sawa. Kama bado unakumbuka hiyo story, ni kumaanisha hujarecover msee. Yuko hapa. Jackie. Jackie. Niulizie Jen, tuko na hatuna swali, si ndio? Ambia Jen afanye hivyo at least. Right, just a minute after 7 a.m. this Tuesday, the 8th day of the month of June. You're just on time for your world. Now, on the 16th of June, just over a week from now, Africa will be celebrating the International Day of the African Child, a day set aside to celebrate the children of Africa and call for serious introspection and commitment towards addressing the numerous challenges facing children across the continent. Now, ahead of the commemorations, we take stock of the progress which has been made towards the realization of children's rights in Kenya and the challenges that lie ahead. My name is Victor Kirprop, and this is Your World. Coming up, we discuss the status of implementation of the rights of children in Kenya and the challenges ahead. What's the role of higher education in accelerating progress towards the achievement of Sustainable Development Goals? We find out in the second part of the show. Burkina Faso bans the use of motorbikes after 160 people were killed in a weekend raid by armed militants.
Stop them being used as platforms for destabilization.
And the Nigerian government is in discussions with social media platform Twitter after it suspended the US social media giant's services in Nigeria. Right, before we get into that conversation about children, let's just give you a quick update of something else that matters most to you, and that is the coronavirus situation in Kenya and across the world. These are the latest numbers according to Corona Tracker. 174,376,256 people have been confirmed with COVID-19 so far across the world. 157,904,528 of them have recovered so far, but sadly we've lost 3,751,988 people to COVID-19 so far. That is across the world, and of course those figures courtesy of Corona Tracker. In Kenya, 172,639 people have been confirmed with COVID-19 so far in Kenya. These are the latest figures according to the Ministry of Health. 118,226 of them have recovered so far, but sadly we have lost 3,308 people to COVID-19 in Kenya so far. We continue to urge you to follow, of course, the protocol set out by the Ministry of Health, including washing your hands or sanitizing as regularly as you can, masking up at all times, and maintaining the 1.5 meters social distance. For now, Another quick update of what else is happening across the African continent. And Burkina Faso has banned the use of motorbikes in the country's northern region, where 160 people were killed in a weekend raid by armed militants. Suspected jihadists on motorcycles carried out the massacre in the village of Solhan in one of the deadliest attacks since the Islamist violence erupted in the West African country in 2015. Burkina Faso, which shares porous borders with Niger and Mali, has been hit by jihadist attacks for 6 years, and they have grown in frequency and intensity. More than 1,400 people in Burkina Faso have died, and at least 1 million have fled their homes. Let's stay in West Africa. And the Nigerian government says it is in discussions with social media platform Twitter after the government suspended the U.S. social media giant services in the country, branding its use as unpatriotic. The Twitter suspension has provoked an outcry from the international community and rights groups who denounced it as a threat to freedom of expression in Africa's most populous country.
Why we've taken this measure is to see to what extent we can rebalance these media as forces of good and stop them being used as platforms for destabilization.
Believe in human rights and freedom of speech. But all that also has to be used where freedom of speech is concerned responsibly. And where that is not the case, the government obviously has to take measures.
There are issues of responsible use of social media, but we remain firm in our position that free access to the ability to express oneself is actually very important, and perhaps even more important.
Now, here's a story that is in relation to the conversation that we'll be having shortly about children. And the prime suspect in the abduction and murder of 8-year-old Chantel Nzembi will remain in police custody for 7 more days to allow the police to conclude their investigations. Nativity Mutindi Ndhuku and 3 other suspects in the murder are being detained at the Kitengela police station. NTV's Ruth Sarmway has our update.
27-year-old Nativity Mutindi Ndhuku, accompanied by the 4th suspect, Patrick Mureithi Wambaire, were presented at the Kajiado Law Courts for the first time after they were arrested for their alleged role in the murder of 8-year-old Chantel Nzembi. Chantel went missing on the 29th of May this year, only for her body to be found 3 days later by the roadside in Kitengela town, stashed in a gunny bag. Appearing before Kajiado resident magistrate Edwin Mulochi, the two agreed to the extension of their stay in police custody following an application by the prosecution to have them in remand for 7 more days to allow the detectives to conclude their investigations.
In view of their acquiescence, the respondent's acquiescence to detention for 7 days, I allow the application. We will mention on 15th of June for directions, together with the other related miscellaneous application E067, and then be detained at Kitengela police station.
One suspect, a boda rider Livingstone Makacha, was found with a handset that was used by the abductors to call Chantel's mother, Christine Gina, demanding for 300,000 shillings as ransom. Makacha is also suspected to have dumped Chantel's body a few hours after the abductors made the last call on the 31st of May at 8:47 a.m. Nativity Ndhuku was found in possession of the mobile SIM card that was used to make the ransom demand call. Another suspect, Francis Mbuthia Mikuhu, is said to have used his identification details to register a new cell phone line in Kiserian town for the purpose of receiving the ransom money. Patrick Mureithi Wambaire, An Airtel roadside agent in Kitengela registered the SIM card. Police are building a case against the four after releasing Agnes Kasiva-Nzioki, who is said to have picked up Chantel on the day she disappeared. The four will remain in police custody until the 15th of June, when the case will be mentioned. Detectives are hunting for a fifth female suspect said to be their accomplice. The post-mortem report by government pathologist Johansen Odor revealed that Chantel died of suffocation from blockage of mouth and nose. Ruth Sarmoi, NTV.
Right, let's get you started on that conversation that we are having this morning about children. And as I mentioned earlier, on the 16th of June, that is the International Day of the African Child, a day that has been set aside to, first of all, of course, celebrate the African child and call for commitment towards addressing the challenges facing African children today. And for us here in Kenya, we'd want to take a stock and see how far we have gone in, of course, the realization of children's rights in Kenya, which is provided in our constitution and also in international law. To help us dissect today's conversation, I'm joined in studio by Walter Odhiambo, is the country director at SOS Children's Villages in Kenya. Good morning and welcome to the show, Walter.
Good morning, Victor.
All right, and also joining us this morning on studio is Seth Nyamweya, is the Deputy Chief State Counsel and also a member of the Board of Management at the National Council for Children's Services. Seth, good morning and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Victor, and good morning, viewers.
Good. Gentlemen, maybe we can just start. Let me just get your reactions to the story we've just seen on air of the child that was abducted in Kitengela. The abductors demanded ransom from the parents, and later when they could not raise the fee, the child was later found murdered.
Thanks, Victor. Thank you for having us. I think I'd like to appreciate you and the Nation Media Group for having us.
Yeah.
Because that story that you've just read is at the core of what we are going to discuss today.
Yeah.
It's a moment that we reflect on some of the progresses and some of the challenges we continue to have in accessing children's rights in Kenya and in Africa. And as you can see, one of the concerns that we continue having is the increasing number of cases of violence against children. I think you must have followed the report that was issued by government that gave us those very scary statistics on what has happened over the last year. And especially now that we are in this pandemic period, where the cases keep on increasing. And if you're going to talk about access to rights for children, we cannot ignore these kind of cases. I think we need to reflect, as you said in your opening remarks, on some of these issues that continue to become a concern, especially for children.
Okay.
The Constitution gives us life as a basic right. So when children are murdered unnecessarily like this, it should be a cause for concern. Okay. It really should be a cause for concern. Innocent children murdered for mistakes that are not theirs. We need really to think through some of these things.
Okay. So it's definitely a very sad story. Let me just get your opening remarks as reactions to that story.
Thank you, Victor. This is a very unfortunate incident that occurred. It's so sad that criminals are kidnapping children, innocent children, and murdering them. This is a criminal offense. It is actually murder. And I think the government is taking measures on these increasing kidnappings of not only children, even adults. Okay. It's so sad because we are about to celebrate the Day of the African Child, and we are witnessing murders of innocent children in this country. Yes.
All right, thank you. And maybe to start us off then, Walter, we can start with the importance then of this Day of African Child, the fact that it's being commemorated every year in regards to, of course, protecting child, especially with the story that we've just highlighted.
Yeah, it's a day that we set aside, we in childcare and children's rights, 16th of June, to just reflect on how we are advancing in ensuring that children access their rights fully. So I'm happy with the theme that we've picked this year. This year we are looking at 30 years after the charter. How much progress have we made towards the vision that we established of getting the 10 aspirations by 2040?
Okay.
Yeah, so to me it's an important day, especially based on what I said earlier. As we continue seeing issues that affect children, we need to actually reflect very deeply on what are those gaps that still make it impossible for children to access their full rights.
Okay, and so maybe the question there would be 30 years, which is those are 3 decades, and we still of course have the issues like the ones we have seen. How are we making progress?
I think I'll start by the positives, the good side.
Yes.
For Kenya, we were able to domesticate the charter into the Children's Act 2001. And with that, we've seen some significant movements. I know within government, the very different ministries, departments, and agencies have made some progress. And we now see movements, especially in education. We have free primary education. So the right to education has progressed quite well. Where we have children now accessing education, as much as we're still saying, as much as we still say that 2020 showed us things. A lot of children, especially the underprivileged children, were not able to access education because when Corona came in, we converted more of the education into digital and electronic platforms, which were not accessible in the rural areas. But yes, we've progressed in free primary education. We see the increase of bursaries. So quite a number of disadvantaged children are able to access education through bursaries. We see quite a number of transfers. When you go to the rural areas, the disadvantaged communities, the cash transfers has enabled a number of children to progress. We see progress in child rights clubs. So where children join and they're able to articulate their issues themselves. So that has increased child participation and children's voices where it matters. Children's assemblies. So we've seen quite some progress along that line. We've seen also progress in policy, the policy frameworks, legal frameworks and administrative frameworks. A number of policies have come in that are friendly to that cause. We've seen administratively. My friend Seth here is with the National Council for Children's Services. That has been established. As much as we would like to see it maybe grow and penetrate into the 47 counties where the children are. There's progress in terms of establishing that. We already now have a structure. Through them, we are now able to have the local advisory councils where we have the community at the very basic level, helping tease out issues that affect children and bring that profile higher. So we are happy about that.
Okay. Maybe Seth, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much would you give Kenya as a country that is not just government but also stakeholders in advancing these issues?
Well, Victor, thank you very much for that one. On a scale of 1 to 10, I would like to say that Kenya has made great strides in terms of protecting the rights of the child. I can give Kenya 8, according to my assessment from the National Council for Children's Services. Let me start with the issues of law. First of all, we had the Children and Young Persons Act, which was a cake, and you remember it was repealed. We came up with the Children's Act, 2001. Kenya was one of the first countries to ratify the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. It was also the first country, one of the first countries in Africa to ratify the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. Another issue was the promulgation of the Constitution of 2010. Under Article 53, it specifically provides for children's rights under the specific application of rights. We have also made other strides like coming up with the children's courts, designated children's courts. This is a form of special treatment to children. There is also the enactment of the Legal Aid Act, Witness Protection Act, Victim Protection Act. The National Council for Children's Services has come up with a national plan of action which has strategies on how to support children and in terms of safeguarding their rights. My colleague there talked about free education. In Africa, we have made great strides if you compare Kenya with other countries, especially from the sub-Saharan Africa. And the government is in the process of rolling out the universal health care. And the latest is that we have come up with a children's bill, a new children's bill 2020, which is now aligned to the new Constitution 2010. You remember the Children's Act 2001 came before the promulgation of the Constitution. So most of the children's rights were not embedded in the Constitution. Now they are embedded in that draft.
Okay.
And you remember that the Children's Act 2001 did not have defined rules and subsidiary legislation that supported this current act that is.
Okay.
Yes.
And that is important because we cannot separate the realization of children's rights from, access to child-friendly justice system. But the problem sometimes is, and given the list of the things that you have, of course, highlighted, the problem sometimes is most of this progress is seen on the policy side. So things are provided for in the Constitution, things are provided for in law, but in reality, the resources to then now make it efficient or make it a reality, that's where the gap is.
Yes, I agree with you, but in the first instance, we need to come up with policy and the law so that we can be able to implement the policies. I agree we have challenges, but in terms of comparison with other countries in the region, we are far much ahead. Yes, Victor.
Okay. Walter, and I take note of the fact that you mentioned that you wanted to start with the positives, and then you highlighted it. But there are definitely areas that we should have done better.
And that is why I was thanking you for starting us off with that story.
Yeah.
Because that, to me, is an indication of gaps that still need to be looked at. And I'll bring in a standing joke that my colleagues outside Kenya have of Kenya.
Okay.
That we are very good at policies when it comes to documentation. Setting up policies, laws, and everything, we are very good.
In fact, there's the other joke of many countries coming here
to even learn from us.
Yes.
But then when it comes to execution, implementation, it becomes an issue. And to me, that is where the gaps start. That we have the frameworks, we have the policies, but then we are not implementing. And you know, when you don't implement policies, then the action is not realized. So you still have, my colleague has talked about the National Plan of Action 2015-2022. What is the status of implementation of that? You see, that is a challenge. It is there, yes, but what is the status of implementation?
Okay.
We have the National Response and Prevention Plan on ending violence against children. About 6 months since we launched that. Nothing has happened, you see. So those are now where the challenges to us remains, because we think the profile or the priority levels of children's issues are not where it should be. I'll bring the joke of BBI.
Yeah. BBI
has stopped everything. The other day when we were just about to have Madaraka Day in Kisumu, there was talk about corona rates and the challenges that is bringing to the people. And at some stage, we thought that the celebrations were going to be cancelled. But it went ahead. Why? BBI has to continue. So if we can stop everything...
and focus on the important issues.
And focus on the important issues.
Yeah.
To an extent that when we start hearing these issues that affect children, at this level, where children violence against children is very prominent. And we move on like nothing has happened. It's a big issue.
And that is important because, I mean, if you look at the list of risks that face children today, issues of exploitation, issues of trafficking, issues of poverty, the issues of the abduction that we've just seen, and even now the very sad ending of even murder. If these policies are supposed to address these issues, then we cannot afford to have the gaps that we have today, do we?
That's true. That's true. That's true. And we need, I know we are doing the budgets tomorrow. Probably we'll need to look at how much has been allocated to enforcing some of these policies and issues that you're talking about. Yeah, we'll need to criticize that as people are interested in children, just to see what kind of prominence we give to children issues.
Okay, and let me just come back to you on the issue of the budget, because I want to go back to Seth on the issue of the plans that you said are taking too long. Seth, do you want to respond as to maybe sometimes why these things take too long to implement?
Thank you, Victor. Yes, indeed we have those plans. The government has so many plans, but there is the issue of funding. We cannot avoid the issue of funding. Those challenges are there within governments. But at NCCS, we have tried to implement the plans that we have been having, like even the strategies for protection of children. But there are those constraints of funding. But we are optimistic that once we get the funding, we'll be able to achieve all the plans that we have.
Okay. All right, and maybe just to come back to you, Walter, then, because this budget will be tabled on Thursday. We all have expectations of areas that should be prioritized. But even before we start guessing or wondering what will be allocated to children and children's services and efforts to protect children, are you satisfied with the allocations of the previous years?
So far, I would say it's still a big gap. We could do better. We've made progress, yes, but we could do better because of what you're saying. Some of the issues that keep on coming. You look at coordination, for instance, coordination of children's issues. We could do much better. We look at data on children. There's still a lot of inadequacies in helping us understand where the child is and what is happening to the child. Those are gaps that I think with the right resource allocation, we should be able to capture data.
And let me just bring into context some discussion that we were having some few weeks back about the issue of missing children. And we realized that the first national database that follows issues of missing children was only established a few years ago, and there are no resources to actually make it more efficient and effective. So we depend on non-governmental organizations to run such systems, like a central system where now all these cases will be recorded. Has this child been found? What is ongoing? Which agency or which police station is actually following up?
Yeah, so it's still a gap. We work very close with government, of course, but we could do better, especially if government takes the lead in putting in the right resources to be able to get that information. We cannot be speaking about ending violence against children if we don't have data on children, especially if we don't have the child information protection systems active and working everywhere. So if we can be able to put the right resources to that, probably we'll be making the right move. If we can have the agencies that are mandated to look into children's issues, well-resourced and well-coordinated, then we could have some of these challenges that we're having dealt with well. My colleague has talked about a juvenile justice system. We still have a lot of cases of children that are unnecessarily delayed. Drug, some of the perpetrators are not dealt with the way we would like them to be dealt with. And you see now they come back to society and continue perpetrating this violence against children. So there are some issues that we still need to look at. And to me, very good resourcing will be a starting point. We need to look at how much is allocated to children issues across the different ministries, departments and agencies of government. And then we'll need to see better coordination all the way to the very grassroots level.
Okay.
Yeah.
Seth, I'm just looking at the list of what would ideally make up a child-friendly justice system in Kenya. And this is part of what is in that list. The age of criminal responsibility for children should be raised to 12 years from the current 8 years. There was the issue of children not being mixed with adults when they are in police stations. He has mentioned the issue of cases involving children taking too long. And also, children accused of committing offenses, especially minor ones, should be diverted to community-based systems instead of going through the court system. Let me just get your assessment of some of these issues that I have listed and even the ones I have not listed.
Thank you, Victor.
Yeah.
The current children's bill has incorporated most of those provisions that you have talked about. It has incorporated the issue of diversion, which is a form of alternative resolution mechanism on issues of child offenders. The issue of raising the criminal age of responsibility from 8 to 12 is supposed to be in conformity with the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, as well as the UNCRC. We are just domesticating the provisions of those conventions. And Kenya is one of among one of the first countries to come up with that provision clearly in that bill. Some countries have the age of 7, some 9, some 10. I think we are being in conformity with the convention and the charter.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, and maybe just to come back to you then, Walter, and I think you mentioned the issue of COVID-19 earlier, because there is indeed the progress that we have listed. But when COVID came back, we find ourselves in a situation where some of the gains that had already been made are actually being rolled back.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. COVID has really taken us back. In terms of some of the gains, you remember children were at home for about 10 months when they were supposed to be in school. You remember we had to restrict children from playing and enjoying some of these rights of socializing and etc. But I think we are catching up now with some of the effects of the pandemic. I'm happy that we're able to open schools. I'm hoping that we'll be able to take all the necessary care to protect the children while in school, so that they can continue enjoying the right to education. They can continue enjoying the right to socializing and meeting each other. I know we worked quite closely with government most of last year to create online platforms where children could share with us some of the challenges we're having, some of the experiences we're having during COVID, including with the learning that we had taken digital that time. So yeah, the worry will remain the effects of COVID to the economy, because at the end of the day, when we adults suffer, job losses, some deaths, you read some very grim statistics on the number of deaths from COVID. That affects children. At the end of the day, children still lose parents, parents lose jobs, children lose income indirectly. So we hope we'll be able to to get our way out of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and now let me just widen the scope then at this point, because if I put the scope in Africa, maybe the challenges would be bigger. But for a Kenyan child today, from the ones in the city to the ones in the villages, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges and areas of concern facing a Kenyan child today?
We need to have more participation. Children's participation. We need to have more of the children's voices in charting the course of this country. So if we could expand that access to participation, that would be fantastic. I know we are now heading to Parliament with the Children's Bill 2020. I think I'd like to thank the President for accenting to it very fast. And taking it back to Parliament, that was very commendable. But as we have this discussion, I'm sure politicians are watching and they're hearing. Yeah. We are really expecting a lot from them, because if we can be able to move the Children's Bill very quickly in Parliament, as it is, without bringing in a drama onto it, then that bill takes care of quite a number of issues that we are grappling with around children. Yeah.
What would be some of these issues that you believe the bill would indeed take care of?
Things like violence against children, the increasing numbers that we've talked about, continues to be a big issue.
Because there's a crazy statistic about, I think, 1 in 2 adults experienced sort of violence when they were a child. Something very, I think I read somewhere.
Grim. We'll be able to make sure that justice, access to justice for children, will be met just through that Children's Bill 2020. So there's quite a number of issues that it looks into. Access to education, especially for the vulnerable children. Access to health, universal health coverage. We did test it, but I'm not sure how far it went. So things around that.
Okay. Maybe, Seth, what's your perspective of this bill?
Sorry?
What's your perspective of this bill that is now in Parliament?
The Children's Bill?
Yes.
What I can say, it's a very good bill. It has very good provisions for safeguarding the rights of the children in Kenya.
Okay. All right.
It's right now in Parliament. Just like my colleague has said, the politicians are watching. We are waiting for Parliament to pass it. And it's going to be a first one in Africa. I wish I had a draft here.
Okay.
Yeah, but I assure you that it's going to be a very first one in Africa, and African countries are going to benchmark on this bill once it becomes law.
So we'll look at
it was through a consultative process.
Yeah.
And I even think my colleague was part of it.
Why you?
So we are looking at parliamentarians to pass that bill.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So I think we are looking at some sort of a game changer once it's passed, though.
That's going to be a big game changer.
Okay.
Big game changer.
All right. Let me just come back to the issue that you just previously highlighted. And even before we get into the ins and outs of it, let's just define the child participation for anyone who is wondering what is this all about.
Child's participation is about ensuring that we don't make decisions for children. Children are given the opportunity to voice their concerns, their issues, and the direction that they like to see issues affecting them take. So as I said earlier, it's an area that we made some progress through the children's assemblies, through the child rights clubs, but we could do more in ensuring that these structures are as pervasive as possible, and all children are able to access these structures to air their concerns.
Okay.
We saw that significantly last year during COVID, that a number of children, while the structures do exist in some areas, there are a lot of areas where children will have wanted to speak on what they are going through. As we're deciding whether to open or not to open school, for instance, we missed a number of voices from the children around that time.
And they are the stakeholders in this.
And they are the stakeholders in this. And they are the stakeholders in this.
Okay.
As we are debating now on violence against children, we are missing the voices of children directly on how this is affecting them, what they like to see, for instance. Early marriages. I think you saw the statistics on early marriages. We still have significant cases of early marriages, children being married off very early. We'd like to hear.
And no one cares about what
they're saying, they're saying or what they want, whether they want to be married, whether they want to continue going to school and etc. We'd like to hear the voices of the children. Child labor. Child labor continues to be a big issue. Where we would like to give them the forum to voice their issues around that. And then trafficking, which you mentioned. We still have a big concern around trafficking of children. Yeah.
And I think there's a running joke about children should be seen, not heard.
I'm not very sure that is relevant in 2021, especially as we sit looking at the aspirations 2040 that we are trying to enforce.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me just bring in, Seth at this point. Seth, I want you to think about the family setting the way it is. So you're the father, your wife is the mother, and you have the children. For most families, what the child really thinks doesn't matter, even when the decision on the table actually impacts directly on the child, like the school they are going to attend, like anything that determines the direction of their education.
Thank you, Victor. That's a very interesting one.
Yeah.
According to me, child participation in any decision that is made that affects that child is a very paramount right for that child. Because how do you make decisions that affect a child and you don't give that child a chance to air his or her views? If we go to the Constitution, under Article 10(1), it talks about national values and principles of governance.
Yeah.
Public participation is one of them. If you are making a policy decision, you must involve those people that are going to be affected. I take it as an element of democracy and good governance. Child participation, currently in Kenya, we do not have an overarching framework, but there is a policy that has been developed, which is awaiting approval by the relevant authorities.
Okay.
Yeah, and there are several structures that the government has put in place for child participation, and I'm sure my colleague is aware. There is the children assemblies, there is the children rights clubs, students' unions. Children have been invited. While we are developing these laws, even the children's bill, they were invited, they gave their views. Even in other documents that we develop relating to safeguard of their rights, we invite these children, and then they come to these forums, they are given time, and then they air their views. It's an element of good governance which should be nurtured in the children as they are growing.
If I can challenge you right there, Seth, because sometimes there's a difference between participation and meaningful participation. Because, so the children are airing their views, we have the rights clubs, the assembly, the children assemblies, but are we looking at what is in that document that they presented? Are we factoring that before we develop any policy?
Indeed we do. But as I said, because of lack of overarching framework for public participation. Public participation also involves not only adults, it involves children. There's actually a principle in that draft about inclusion, which says inclusion of children in public participation in all documents that are going to be developed. Policy documents, legal documents that are going to be developed by the national government or the county government.
Okay.
Yes.
Walter, do you agree? Do you think we are indeed taking their views seriously?
Yes, to some extent. Yes, to some extent, but we could do better.
And I'm saying this because we normally wake up and we realize, oh, the Ministry of Education has decided school is tomorrow. No, parents not consulted, students not consulted, and some of these students are actually university students. You know, they really have something they can say. Forget about the toddlers.
And that is why I said actually use the case of education, where we open, close without involving children. We make some decisions without involving them. We could do better in that area. And then, you know, we are now in 2 levels of government. So we could also be talking only about what's happening at the national level. But we are missing what's happening at the devolved units, where we also have a lot of decisions being made that affect children.
Okay.
And we are not talking about that.
Okay.
We develop, for instance, the county integrated development plans. Where is the voice of children? Yes, in that. We talk about participation at the county level, but we still don't ensure deliberately that the voices of children are involved in that participation at the county level.
I think what I'm getting from this is we have to be deliberate.
We have to be deliberate.
Okay.
We have to be deliberate.
So how can we then make their voices count? So that, because I think, I mean, if you make it like a formality that every year we collect your views, even with Wananchi, by the way, not just children, if you make it like a formality that you're taking my views every year, but once the policy comes out, it has not been factored in, I'll definitely grow tired.
And to me, that is where the other gap lies. How do we monitor and evaluate the impact of some of these policies and actions that we take? There's one thing to say, okay, children are participating, but we need to come back and just evaluate how those voices find themselves into the policy spaces on issues around children. So we still are not very good at monitoring and evaluation on especially some of the actions that we take on children or some of the inclusions that we define as happening. Yeah.
Okay, so now it's just 1 week away before these celebrations. Just talk to us about your expectations, just as for the commemoration, but moving forward with regards to protecting a Kenyan and African child, and just a child of the world.
I'll be very happy if I saw the profile of children issues raised higher than it is now. I don't think it is where it needs to be. Because once we give that prominence to children's issues, then everything follows. We'll then make sure that it is happening. If children are participating and airing their voices, then we'll make sure that it reaches policy level or implementation level. So if we can raise the profile of children issues, I'll be very happy with that. We'll need to look at budget allocation. We in programs say no funds, no programs.
Oh, no funds, no programs.
No funds, no programs. So if we are very happy with the programs that we've designed, but we don't allocate them resources, we do not expect those programs to see the light of day. So then we'll be also need to look at how much are we allocating to children issues. And this should be across the ministries, departments and agencies. And then at the country level as a whole, how much are we allocating? So raise the profile of children issues, make it very, very high priority. We need to see, like the case that you started as off-wing. We are not getting enough reaction for that kind of issue because the profile is not where it needs to be. We are not having the right resources. If you don't have resources, then you're not going to do much. We are talking about juvenile justice systems. There are gaps because the resources to allocate to go by with that is not there.
Okay.
We are talking about police. We've incorporated police to help us deal with the child issues. But because there are no resources, to take care of this. It is just a statistic, so to speak.
And we keep talking about every year.
We keep talking about it every year. And then finally, to see better coordination mechanisms. My colleague is from the NCCS. I know they are sharing some roles and responsibilities with the Department of Children's Services. Just a clarity of who is doing what, and ensuring that the structures that are able to coordinate the roles and responsibilities are resourced well, all the way to the village level.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe Seth, from where you sit, how can we make things better?
Thank you, Victor. I agree there are challenges.
Yeah.
And we also agree that there are financial constraints within government. Government has so many activities to fund. And children's rights are progressive. By that I mean, as time goes by, as we get more resources, we allocate more resources, and then we plan, and then we do what is required.
Okay.
Now, my colleague raised the issue of clarity of roles between the Director of Children's Services and the NCCS.
Okay.
Those roles have now been distinguished in the current children's bill, which is in Parliament.
Okay.
And there was also the issue of public participation at county level.
Yeah.
I'm aware that some county governments have enacted public participation legislation, as well as adopted county public participation guidelines, which define the framework for citizens' engagement in terms of public participation. And you have been seeing people going to court on issues of public participation, on issues of laws that they were never consulted, policies. People are enlightened. And that's why I'm saying once we have that overarching policy, we'll be able to have a law that governs public participation, the thresholds, because currently the threshold is not actually defined.
Okay. Let me just take this very quick call, I believe, from a caller in Nairobi. Should be Tana. Good morning. Habari ya asubuhi, and you have a question or a comment?
Yes, salimia wageni sana wote, Bana Trevor, waambie tunawapenda.
Okay.
Yeah, niko na swali kwa uliza tu. Kuna mtoto mahali ambaye alikuwa amepigwa na mwalimu, naye akaumizwa mkono. So this boy is raised by a single mother.
Yeah.
Na nimeitwa nikashuhudia hiyo kitendo, tukaenda tukaongea na mwalimu. Mwalimu akakubali ya kwamba alipiga mtoto kweli. Lakini wakati daktari alileta report kwenda kupata ile x-ray, ilikaa sana tukingoja kwa ofisi. When the x-ray came, ilikuwa tatanishi. Ni kwamba mwalimu amekubali alipiga mtoto sababu ya kosa fulani, lakini daktari analeta report kwamba mtoto alianguka na pikipiki. So tukauliza mwalimu, kwani kuna pikipiki kwa shule yenye watoto huwa anaendesha baada ya lesson? Tukashindwa, hiyo jibu hatukupatiwa. So tukaamua kupeleka mtoto Allocation in Kisumu. Report ya daktari ikawa tofauti tena. So huyu mtoto ako nyumbani, ako on bandage, haendi shule. We are waiting more days atolewe bandage kwa sababu hawezi andika is a right hand. Sasa ukiangalia the report zote mbili, ya Allocation na yenye iko kwa shule, ni tofauti.
Okay.
Na hizi x-ray zote tulinyimwa.
Yeah.
So huyu mtoto is a form 3 child candidate, na tujui sasa nani atatusaidia.
Asante Tana.
I'm just asking you, Trevor, ask our visitor there. This guy is 18 years. anahesabiwa kuna bado ako shule, anahesabiwa kwa watoto ambao anaweza saidika, ama sasa hatujui sheria tupeleke wapi. Even the police are denied us the P3.
Asante tana, wacha tupate maoni yao. Definitely the issue of violence is not going away. Let me just get your reaction to what he's saying briefly before we close this conversation.
I think we'll need to hear what my colleague says.
From the other side.
From the other side.
Yeah.
That's part of the gaps I was telling you about the juvenile justice system and some of the gaps that still exist with it.
Okay. Seth, briefly, before we get to your closing remarks, just to, react to what the caller has been talking about.
Thank you, Victor. We, according to the caller, the details are not very clear, but what I can say is corporal punishment was outlawed. It's a criminal offense.
Okay.
And that's a matter which needs to be reported to the police so that investigations can be done and the necessary action taken.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Let me just get your closing remarks, gentlemen. I'll start with you, Seth, then. How do we accelerate this, of course, progress towards the realization of children's rights in Kenya, in your closing remarks?
Thank you, Victor. Just like we have discussed, we have government policies on the safeguard of the rights of the children and various laws. Currently, we are doing well, but we need to do more in terms of implementing those laws and policies. And we need to source for more funding and even allocate more funding for children. Because if you have plans and laws to implement, but there are no resources, it can be a farce, because when you have the laws here and the policies, but you are unable to implement, maybe what we can do is coordinate even with the children stakeholders, and maybe lobby with the government to add more funding to the children's sector, despite the financial constraints. I saw from the budget policy statement, they touched on the issue of enhancing social protection, food and nutrition, universal health care, and the government will also continue to improve newborn and child health services, and even to protect and mold our younger children into responsible citizens by allocating more resources for the competency-based curriculum.
Okay.
So I think we are doing well, but we need to up our game on the issue of allocation of resources to the children's sector, because they are the pillars of this country.
Thank you, Seth. Walter, just your closing remarks.
Yeah, I'd like to see acceleration on the implementation of the National Plan of Action on Children, 2015-2022, acceleration on the National Response and Prevention against violence on children, and then the big changer, I'd like to see a speedy enactment of the Children's Bill 2020, because that's a game changer. If we can be able to have that sorted, then we'll make big strides towards children accessing their rights.
Do you feel like it's taking too long?
It's taking too long, and I mean, you know, things that go to Parliament. We need goodwill from Parliament. We need serious goodwill from Parliament to ensure that they pass that bill speedy.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. That's where we have to leave it, gentlemen. We have been talking about the rights of children in Kenya, how they can be, of course, advanced, and how we can protect the Kenyan child. Today, remember, the celebrations for the International Day of the African Child will be next week on the 16th of June. Many thanks to my guest this morning, Seth Nyamweze, Deputy Chief State Council and also member of the Board of Management at the National Council for Children's Services, as well as Walter Odhiambo, the Country Director for SOS Children's Villages in Kenya. We have to go for a quick break, but when we come back, we talk about university education, that is higher learning, and the nexus between higher learning and sustainable development goals. Don't go too far.